The ice beneath my feet cracked like gunfire as something massive shifted in the frozen depths below. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her gloved hand against the observation window, watching the thermal readings spike to impossible levels 800 feet beneath Antarctica's surface. The temperature outside was negative 89 degrees Fahrenheit, yet something down there was generating enough heat to melt steel. She'd been stationed at the Vostok Research Station for 6 months, drilling ice cores for climate research. What they found yesterday wasn't supposed to exist. The sonar readings showed a cavern the size of Manhattan filled with liquid water that had been sealed beneath the ice for over 15 million years. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The water was moving, swirling, alive. "Chen, you need to see this." Dr. Marcus Webb's voice crackled through the intercom, panic barely contained. The microphone picked up his ragged breathing as he stood over the drilling equipment. The massive bore that had taken them months to complete was now emitting a low, rhythmic humming that seemed to pulse through the ice itself. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized the sound wasn't mechanical. It was organic. Something vast and ancient had been disturbed from its slumber, and now it was responding to their intrusion. Welcome back to our channel, where we explore the darkest corners of human experience. Tonight's story comes from the most isolated place on our planet, where the line between science and nightmare becomes dangerously thin. Are you watching from somewhere warm? You might want to turn up the heat after this one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments if you've ever experienced something that science couldn't explain. Trust me, after tonight, you'll question everything you thought you knew about what lies beneath our world. Dr. Sarah Chen had always found solace in numbers. Mathematical equations were predictable, reliable, safe. Unlike the chaos of her childhood moving between military bases, scientific data provided the stability she craved. At 34, she'd built a reputation as one of the world's leading glaciologists, specializing in ice core analysis that could reveal Earth's climate history spanning millions of years. The Vostok Research Station sat like a metallic speck on the endless white expanse of Antarctica, surrounded by nothing but ice, stretching to every horizon. The facility housed 12 researchers during the summer season, though Sarah was part of the skeleton crew of 6 that remained through the brutal winter months. The nearest human settlement was over 900 miles away, accessible only by specially equipped aircraft during favorable weather conditions. Her days followed a rigid routine that helped combat the psychological effects of isolation. Morning readings of atmospheric conditions, afternoon analysis of ice samples, evening data compilation. The work was methodical, almost meditative. Each ice core told a story spanning millennia: volcanic eruptions, meteor impacts, climate shifts that had shaped the planet long before humans drew their first breath. But lately, something felt off. The research station's infrastructure was state-of-the-art, powered by a combination of diesel generators and solar panels that worked surprisingly well in the 24-hour daylight of Antarctic summer. Now, in the depths of winter, they relied entirely on the generators, their constant humming providing a mechanical heartbeat that kept them anchored to civilization. Sarah's colleagues were experienced polar researchers, each bringing specialized expertise to their climate study. Dr. Marcus Webb, the expedition leader, was a veteran of 7 Antarctic seasons. Dr. Elena Petrov handled atmospheric chemistry, while Dr. James Liu managed the drilling operations. The support staff technician Mike Rodriguez and communication specialist Anna Larson kept the station functional and connected to the outside world. Yet despite the camaraderie, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. During her late-night data sessions, she'd catch movement in her peripheral vision only to turn and find empty corridors stretching into shadow. The station's heating system created settling noises as metal expanded and contracted, but some sounds didn't fit the pattern. Soft scraping like something moving across ice. Whispers that could have been wind but came from the wrong direction. She'd mentioned these observations to Webb during their weekly psychological evaluation calls, a mandatory check-in designed to monitor the crew's mental health during the isolation period. He'd assured her that auditory and visual hallucinations were common in extreme environments, particularly during the polar night when their circadian rhythms were disrupted by months of darkness. But Sarah's scientific mind cataloged inconsistencies. The sounds followed patterns that random hallucinations shouldn't have. They occurred at specific times, always between 2:17 and 2:23 a.m., lasting exactly 4 minutes and 18 seconds. The scraping sounds moved in calculated directions, as if something was systematically exploring the station's perimeter. She'd started keeping a log hidden in her personal files. If her colleagues thought she was losing her grip on reality, it could end her career. But the data was undeniable. Something was happening that their current scientific models couldn't explain. The Vostok drilling project aimed to reach Lake Vostok, a subglacial lake discovered through satellite imagery and seismic studies. The lake had been sealed beneath the ice sheet for millions of years, potentially preserving ancient microbial life that could revolutionize their understanding of evolution and the possibility of life on other planets. What they hadn't expected was how the lake would respond to their approach. The breakthrough happened at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, while most of the station slept through the perpetual Antarctic night. Sarah was pulling an all-nighter analyzing mineral compositions in ice cores extracted from 2,600 feet down when the drilling alarm pierced the silence like a banshee's wail. She sprinted through the narrow corridors, her breath forming ice crystals in the frigid air between heated sections. The drilling chamber was the station's heart, a massive room housing the equipment that had been boring through the ice for 8 months, seeking the pristine waters of Lake Vostok below. Webb was already there, his face pale in the emergency lighting. The drilling apparatus had stopped automatically when sensors detected the transition from ice to liquid water. But that wasn't what made his hands tremble as he stared at the monitors. "Look at these thermal readings," he whispered, pointing at displays that showed impossible data. The lake's temperature registered at 39 degrees Fahrenheit, well above freezing, despite being trapped beneath nearly half a mile of ice for millions of years. Geothermal activity could explain some warming, but not the heat signatures they were detecting. The sonar mapping revealed the lake's true scope, a vast underwater cavern system extending far beyond their initial estimates. But the sonar waves were revealing something else, something that made Sarah's stomach clench with inexplicable dread. The return patterns showed dense masses moving through the water, objects too large and too organized to be simple geological formations. "Could be ice chunks that broke off during our drilling," Webb suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. The objects on sonar moved with purpose, circling their drilling site in patterns that suggested intelligence rather than random drift. Dr. Liu arrived next, followed by the others roused by the alarms. The cramped drilling chamber felt even smaller, with 6 people crowded around monitors displaying data that challenged everything they thought they knew about the lake. "We need to deploy the ROV," Liu announced, referring to their remotely operated vehicle designed for underwater exploration. The plan had always been to send the robotic submarine down once they reached the lake. But nobody had expected these readings. As Liu prepared the ROV for deployment, Sarah noticed something that made her skin crawl. The water in the borehole wasn't still. It was moving, rising and falling in a rhythmic pattern that resembled breathing. Each cycle lasted exactly 18 seconds, too regular to be caused by pressure changes or geological activity. The ROV descended through 800 feet of frigid lake water, its lights cutting through darkness that hadn't been disturbed for 15 million years. The camera feed showed remarkably clear water free of the sediment and debris they'd expected. But as the vehicle descended deeper, its lights began revealing structures that shouldn't exist in a sealed underground lake. Geometric formations lined the lake bed, not the random scatter of rocks and sediment, but organized patterns that suggested construction. The formations were massive, some reaching hundreds of feet in height, covered in what appeared to be a thick organic coating that pulsed with bioluminescent activity. "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez whispered, voicing what they were all thinking. These weren't natural formations. They were buildings. Ancient alien architecture that predated known civilization by millions of years. But the most disturbing discovery came when the ROV's lights illuminated something moving near the structures. At first glance, it resembled marine life, long undulating forms that could have been enormous kelp or primitive sea life. But as the camera focused, the shapes revealed impossible anatomy. Tentacled appendages the size of subway trains moved with deliberate intelligence, manipulating smaller objects around the structures with tool-like precision. The creatures, and there was no other word for them, seemed to be maintaining the ancient buildings, performing tasks that required complex reasoning and coordination. Some appeared to be excavating new sections of the structure, while others tended to what could only be described as gardens of bioluminescent organisms that provided light in the eternal darkness. Sarah watched in fascination and growing terror as one of the massive entities turned toward their ROV. The creature's head, if it could be called that, contained clusters of what appeared to be sensory organs that fixed on their camera with unmistakable awareness. It approached slowly, deliberately, its movements fluid and graceful despite its enormous size. When it reached the ROV, the creature extended what looked like a delicate sensory appendage and gently touched the vehicle. The contact sent feedback through their systems that caused every monitor in the drilling chamber to flicker. For a moment, Sarah could have sworn she heard something impossible, a voice ancient and vast speaking directly into her mind. "You have awakened us from our long dream. We have been waiting." The message wasn't heard through their ears, but felt directly in their consciousness, carrying emotions and concepts that human language couldn't properly convey. Images flashed through Sarah's mind, visions of Earth as it existed before ice caps formed, when this region was covered in warm seas and the creatures below ruled vast underwater civilizations. Then the contact ended abruptly. The creature withdrew, disappearing into the darkness beyond their lights. But the damage was done. Every person in that chamber had received the same mental transmission, and they all understood with terrible clarity that they had discovered something that was never meant to be found. The ROV's systems began malfunctioning. Static filled the camera feed as the vehicle's electronics were systematically corrupted by some form of energy emanating from the lake below. Within minutes, they lost all contact with their multi-million-dollar exploration vehicle. But losing the ROV was the least of their problems. The borehole that connected their station to the lake below was no longer just a research aperture. It had become a doorway, and something ancient and impossibly intelligent now knew exactly where to find them. The thermal readings from the lake began climbing steadily, and the rhythmic breathing pattern in the water grew stronger, more pronounced. Whatever lived in those ancient depths was no longer sleeping. It was rising. The first sign that their situation had fundamentally changed came 18 hours after losing contact with the ROV. Sarah was monitoring atmospheric readings when she noticed the station's internal temperature fluctuating in patterns that defied their heating system's capabilities. The variations followed the same 18-second rhythm they'd observed in the lake water, as if something was synchronizing the station's environment with the pulse they'd detected below. Dr. Petrov discovered the next anomaly during her routine air quality analysis. The station's atmosphere contained trace amounts of gases that shouldn't exist at their location, complex, organic compounds that suggested the presence of massive biological activity. The concentrations were increasing hourly, as if something was actively introducing these substances into their environment. "It's impossible," Petrov muttered, running the analysis for the fourth time. "These compounds require biological processes we've never documented. The molecular structures are wrong, like they evolved under completely different environmental pressures." Webb called an emergency meeting in the station's common area, a cramped space that served as their dining room, recreation area, and informal conference room. The 6 researchers huddled around a table laden with printouts, laptop computers, and half-empty coffee cups that had grown cold as they absorbed the implications of their data. "We need to discuss evacuation protocols." Webb began, his leadership voice strained with barely concealed anxiety. "The situation below ground is beyond our current understanding, and our safety may be compromised." But Anna Larson, their communications specialist, delivered news that crushed any hope of immediate rescue. "I've been trying to establish contact with McMurdo Station for the past 6 hours. All frequencies are experiencing interference, not atmospheric static, but something actively jamming our signals. It's like something is deliberately isolating us." The jamming signals displayed patterns that seemed almost linguistic, as if their unknown neighbors below were attempting to communicate through electromagnetic interference. Sarah had spent hours analyzing the waveforms, finding mathematical relationships that suggested intelligence rather than random noise. As if responding to their growing understanding, the station's lights began flickering in synchronized patterns. Not random electrical problems, but deliberate sequences that matched the rhythmic breathing they'd observed in the lake. Something was learning their systems, adapting to their technology with frightening speed. The temperature fluctuations grew more pronounced as evening approached. Despite the heating system running at maximum capacity, sections of the station began developing patches of frost on the interior walls. But the frost formations weren't random. They created intricate geometric patterns that resembled the architectural structures they'd observed on the lakebed. Dr. Liu made the most disturbing discovery while checking the borehole equipment. The water level in their access shaft had risen nearly 40 feet since the previous day, bringing the lake's contents dangerously close to their drilling chamber. But analysis of the rising water revealed it wasn't the same liquid they'd initially detected. "The composition has changed," Liu reported, his voice tight with controlled fear. "It's not just water anymore. There are suspended organisms, microscopic life forms that display unprecedented complexity. They appear to be engineered rather than naturally evolved. Under microscopic analysis, the organisms resembled tiny machines more than biological entities. They moved with purpose, following programmed behaviors that suggested they were designed for specific tasks. Some appeared to be gathering information, scanning the materials they encountered, and transmitting data through bioelectrical impulses. Others seemed designed for infiltration, capable of passing through the smallest openings in their station structure. Sarah discovered the implications during her late-night data analysis session. The microscopic organisms weren't just present in the rising water, they were present in their air supply, their water reserves, even trace amounts in their food storage. Whatever lived in the lake below had been studying them since the moment they'd made contact, introducing surveillance organisms that could monitor every aspect of their environment. The psychological effects began manifesting around the third day. Rodriguez reported dreams filled with images of vast underwater cities populated by entities that moved through liquid environments with grace that defied earthly physics. The dreams weren't random nightmares, but detailed, consistent visions that all crew members began experiencing simultaneously. In these shared dreams, they walked through corridors of living coral that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The architecture was both beautiful and alien, designed for beings that experienced three-dimensional space differently than humans. Ancient libraries contained knowledge stored in crystalline structures that sang with information when touched. Gardens of impossible organisms created symphonies of light that conveyed complex emotional concepts. But the dreams also carried warnings. The entities that had built this civilization were ancient beyond human comprehension, existing long before Earth's continents had taken their current form. They had withdrawn from the surface world when ice began covering their domain, entering a state of hibernation that had lasted millions of years. Now awakened by human intrusion, they were assessing whether humanity represented a threat to their continued existence. During her fourth night of shared dreaming, Sarah experienced something that chilled her more than Antarctica's killing cold. She found herself in a vast chamber where thousands of the entities gathered in what could only be described as a council meeting. Their communication transcended language, conveying concepts through direct mental contact that human brains could barely process. They were debating humanity's fate. Some entities viewed humans as a curious but ultimately harmless species that could be safely ignored once their current intrusion was dealt with. Others saw humanity's rapid technological development and environmental destruction as evidence of a dangerous cancer that might threaten their ancient civilization. A third faction proposed a more direct approach, studying humanity closely to determine their true nature and potential. Sarah woke from these dreams with the terrible certainty that she and her colleagues had become unwilling subjects in an alien evaluation process. Every action they took, every decision they made was being monitored and analyzed by intelligences that considered human civilization a potential threat to be contained or eliminated. The station's systems began responding to commands they hadn't given. Lights turned on and off, following patterns that seemed designed to facilitate observation. The heating system created temperature gradients that guided their movements through specific areas of the station as if something was hurting them for easier study. Most disturbing of all, the borehole that connected them to the lake below began widening on its own. Each morning revealed that the aperture had grown larger overnight, excavated with precision that their own drilling equipment couldn't match. Whatever lived below was preparing for a more direct form of contact. On the seventh night after their initial discovery, Sarah woke to find frost patterns covering her bedroom window that spelled out words in perfect English. "Come to us. Learn. understand, decide. The invitation was clear, but the implications were terrifying. The entities below weren't just studying them from a distance anymore. They wanted direct contact. They wanted to bring the humans down into their ancient domain for a closer examination. As Sarah stared at the impossible message, she realized that their situation had moved far beyond scientific discovery. They were now participants in a first contact scenario with an intelligence that predated human civilization by millions of years. Whatever decisions they made in the coming hours would likely determine not just their own fate, but possibly the future relationship between humanity and the ancient rulers of Earth's hidden depths. The station's intercom crackled to life with Webb's voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Everyone to the drilling chamber. Now, we have a situation." The drilling chamber had transformed overnight into something that belonged in a fever dream rather than a research station. The borehole, previously a neat circular opening 12 inches in diameter, had expanded into a cavern entrance nearly 6 feet across. The edges weren't rough or broken, they were smooth, precise, carved with tool marks that no human technology could have created. But the widened entrance was just the beginning of their nightmare. The water that had been rising through their access shaft was no longer simply liquid. It moved with purposeful currents that defied gravity, flowing upward along the chamber walls in spiraling patterns that resembled living veins. Within these impossible streams, bioluminescent organisms pulsed with coordinated light shows that hurt to look at directly patterns too complex for human vision to properly process. "The structural integrity sensors are going insane," Liu reported, his voice cracking with stress. "According to our instruments, the chamber should have collapsed hours ago. The ice around the borehole has been completely hollowed out, but somehow the ceiling is supporting itself." Sarah approached the entrance cautiously, her scientific training warring with primal terror. Peering down into the expanded shaft revealed a sight that challenged everything she thought she understood about physics and biology. The tunnel descended through solid ice, but the walls pulsed with organic activity. Living tissue had somehow integrated with the frozen environment, creating a hybrid structure that was part geological formation, part alien biology. Warm air rose from the depths below, carrying scents that had no earthly equivalent. Ozone mixed with something floral, but underlying it was a musk that suggested massive living creatures in close proximity. The air itself seemed thick, almost syrupy, as if the atmosphere below existed under different physical laws than their surface environment. "We need to evacuate immediately," Webb declared, but even as he spoke, they all understood the futility of his statement. Anna's communication equipment had been completely overwhelmed by the electromagnetic interference. The nearest rescue was nearly 1,000 miles away, and even if they could somehow signal for help, no aircraft could reach them in the current storm conditions. As if sensing their desperation, the entity that had touched their IOV days earlier emerged from the depths of the expanded shaft. Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to process what she was seeing. The creature was even larger than their sonar readings had suggested. Its main body filled most of the 6-foot opening, while countless appendages extended in all directions like a living nervous system. But this wasn't a mindless beast. Intelligence gleamed in the clusters of sensory organs that studied its form, and its movements displayed a grace and deliberation that spoke of advanced reasoning capabilities. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their minds without passing through their ears. "Fear is unnecessary." The mental voice conveyed concepts that human language could barely contain. "We seek understanding. You have proven your species capable of reaching our domain. This requires evaluation." Dr. Petrov stumbled backward, pressing herself against the chamber wall as smaller entities began emerging around the larger one. These appeared to be different species altogether. Some resembled enormous jellyfish with crystalline bells that chimed with musical tones. Others looked like living geometric patterns that shifted and flowed as they moved. Despite their alien appearance, each carried an unmistakable sense of ancient wisdom and patient intelligence. Your kind spreads across the surface world with increasing speed. The mental communication continued, and Sarah found herself understanding concepts that had no human equivalent. Notions of planetary stewardship that spanned geological ages, concerns about environmental balance measured in millions of years. "We must determine if you are gardeners or parasites." The creatures began ascending from the shaft, moving through the impossible physics of their hybrid tunnel with fluid grace. As they entered the chamber, reality itself seemed to bend around them. The frozen air grew warm without any visible heat source. Gravity appeared to affect them differently as they moved through three-dimensional space in ways that made Sarah's eyes water to follow. Webb stepped forward, his scientific training overriding his terror. We're researchers. We study the environment. We want to understand. Understanding requires experience. The lead entity interrupted, its mental voice carrying undertones of amusement that was somehow more terrifying than anger would have been. You will come below. You will see what your species has forgotten. You will learn why the ice was allowed to cover our cities. Then you will return to your people with truth. The invitation wasn't optional. Tendrils of living water rose from the streams flowing along the chamber walls, wrapping around each human with surprising gentleness. The organic liquid felt warm against their skin, somehow permeable to air, but providing protection from the frigid environment. As the tendrils lifted them toward the expanded shaft, Sarah realized they were being equipped with some form of alien environmental suit that would allow them to survive in the depths below. Do not resist, the mental voice advised as they began their descent through the hybrid tunnel. We have studied your physiology through the observers we introduced to your environment. You will not be harmed if you remain calm. The journey down felt like falling through liquid light. Bioluminescent organisms lined the tunnel walls, creating a constantly shifting display of colors that had no names in human language. The walls themselves pulsed with what Sarah now recognized as a massive circulatory system, pumping nutrients and information through the living architecture that connected the surface to the depths below. As they descended deeper, the tunnel opened into vast chambers carved from living ice. The architecture was breathtaking, soaring spaces that combined organic curves with geometric precision, creating spaces that felt both natural and impossibly sophisticated. Gardens of crystalline organisms provided illumination while filtering the water and air to maintain optimal environmental conditions. But it was the inhabitants that truly staggered human comprehension. Thousands of the entities moved through the aquatic environment with purposes that spanned centuries. Some tended to vast archives where information was stored in crystalline matrices that sang with accumulated knowledge. Others worked on projects that appeared to be manipulating the fundamental structure of matter itself, shaping new forms of life through techniques that blended biology with physics in ways human science couldn't begin to understand. This is what your species calls Lake Vostok, their guide explained as they moved through galleries filled with wonders that challenged sanity. One of our smaller outposts maintained during our long sleep. We have similar installations beneath every major ice formation on your planet. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. These beings weren't isolated to this single location. They maintained a global network of facilities hidden beneath Earth's frozen regions. Humanity had been sharing the planet with an advanced alien civilization for their entire evolutionary history, never knowing that vast cities lay beneath the ice caps of both polar regions. They were brought to what could only be described as a council chamber, where hundreds of the entities gathered to observe the human specimens. The space was filled with an atmosphere that somehow remained breathable while allowing the aquatic beings to communicate freely. Here, Sarah and her colleagues were subjected to examination that went far beyond physical analysis. The entities probed their memories, accessing human history through their minds with a thoroughness that left them feeling violated and exposed. Every significant event in human development was reviewed, analyzed, and categorized. Wars, scientific discoveries, environmental destruction, artistic achievements, all of it cataloged by intelligences that measured progress in geological time scales. Your species shows promise. The lead entity finally communicated after hours of mental examination, but also great danger. You develop quickly, perhaps too quickly, for wisdom to accompany knowledge. We must decide whether to reveal ourselves or to ensure you remain ignorant until you achieve greater maturity. The implications were staggering. These beings possessed the technology and power to guide or eliminate human civilization entirely. They had been watching, waiting, judging whether humanity deserved to continue existing or if their rapid development posed a threat to the planet's long-term stability. As the examination concluded, Sarah realized that she and her colleagues had become unwilling ambassadors for the entire human race. Whatever the entities decided based on their analysis would determine whether humanity remained alone on Earth or finally learned that they shared their world with intelligences far older and more powerful than themselves. The return journey to the surface felt like awakening from a dream that was too vast for human memory to fully contain. Sarah found herself back in the drilling chamber, standing beside her colleagues as if they had never left. But the evidence of their experience remained. Their clothes were dry despite having been immersed in the alien environment, and their bodies felt different, charged with energy they couldn't identify. The borehole had returned to its original 12-inch diameter, sealed with what appeared to be ordinary ice. Their instruments showed normal readings for lake temperature and depth. Even the sonar equipment registered nothing unusual in the waters below. It was as if the past week of impossible discoveries had been collectively imagined. But the memories remained crystal clear, too detailed and consistent across all 6 witnesses to be dismissed as hallucination. They had walked through living cities beneath the ice. They had been examined by intelligences that had existed since before humanity's earliest ancestors left the trees. Most importantly, they had been given a message to carry back to the world above. "Tell them what you have learned." The entity's final communication echoed in Sarah's mind. "But know that not all of your kind will be ready for this truth. Share carefully. We will be watching." Webb attempted to restore normal station operations, but everyone could sense the fundamental change in their situation. They were no longer alone in the Antarctic wilderness. Every action, every conversation, every decision was being monitored by beings whose understanding of reality far exceeded human comprehension. The communication blackout had mysteriously ended. Anna successfully contacted McMurdo Station, reporting routine research progress and requesting a supply drop within the next 2 weeks. But beneath the normal logistical communications lay an unspoken understanding among the crew they would need time to process what had happened before deciding how much to reveal to the outside world. Dr. Petrov's atmospheric readings showed trace amounts of the exotic compounds they detected during their otherworldly encounter. The substances appeared to be gradually dissipating, as if their alien visitors were carefully removing evidence of their presence. Within days, even the most sensitive instruments would detect nothing unusual about their environment. Liu compiled detailed reports of their drilling progress, documenting the successful penetration of Lake Vostok and the collection of water samples for analysis. His official logs contained no mention of expanded tunnels, living architecture, or encounters with ancient intelligences. The data showed exactly what future researchers would expect to find: a pristine, subglacial lake containing microorganisms that had been isolated for millions of years. But privately, each crew member struggled with the weight of knowledge they now carried. Sarah found herself staring at her ice core samples with new understanding. The mineral formations she'd been analyzing weren't just geological records. They were markers left by the entities below, subtle signs that documented their presence throughout Earth's history for those who knew how to read them. The shared dreams had stopped, but were replaced by moments of clarity that felt like gifts from their underground hosts. Complex scientific problems that had puzzled researchers for decades suddenly seemed obvious. Mathematical relationships that governed climate systems revealed themselves with startling simplicity. It was as if their brief contact with alien intelligence had expanded their capacity for understanding. Rodriguez reported that the station's equipment was functioning better than ever, with efficiency improvements that had no technical explanation. Power consumption dropped while performance increased. The heating system maintained perfect temperature control despite the brutal external conditions. Even their food stores seemed to be lasting longer than calculations suggested possible. Anna discovered that her communication equipment could now detect signals that had previously been beyond its range. Radio transmissions from research stations thousands of miles away came through with perfect clarity. More disturbing, she occasionally picked up communications that didn't match any known broadcasting schedule, transmissions in languages that predated known human civilization, carrying messages that her mind couldn't quite grasp, but that filled her with inexplicable longing. As the days passed, the crew developed an unspoken protocol for their situation. During regular activities and communications with the outside world, they maintained complete normalcy. Their research proceeded according to schedule. Their reports contained nothing unusual, and their psychological evaluations revealed no signs of stress or unusual experiences. But during evening gatherings in the common area, they quietly discussed the implications of their encounter. They were no longer simply climate researchers studying ice cores and atmospheric conditions. They had become keepers of humanity's most significant secret, the knowledge that Earth hosted an ancient civilization that could determine the future of human development. The weight of that responsibility created a bond between them that transcended normal collegial relationships. They understood that they would likely spend the rest of their lives protecting and carefully sharing the most important discovery in human history. Wrong decisions could result in panic military intervention or attempts to exploit the alien technology that could provoke retaliation from beings whose power they had only glimpsed. Yet despite the crushing responsibility, Sarah found herself experiencing something unexpected, a sense of profound privilege. They had been chosen as humanity's first ambassadors to an intelligence that spanned geological ages. Their memories contained wonders that no human had ever witnessed, knowledge that could potentially guide their species toward a wiser relationship with their planet. As the Antarctic winter gradually gave way to spring, supply flights would soon resume. Other researchers would arrive to continue the drilling project and analyze their discoveries. Sarah and her colleagues would return to civilization carrying secrets that could reshape human understanding of their place in the cosmos. But first, they needed to decide exactly how much truth the world was ready to receive. 6 months later, Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the International Climate Research Symposium in Geneva, delivering what would become the most widely viewed scientific presentation in history. Her ice core analysis from Antarctica had revealed evidence of previously unknown microorganisms with potential applications for medicine, environmental cleanup, and space exploration. The discovery was significant enough to earn her team worldwide recognition and substantial funding for future research. But the public presentation represented only a fraction of what they had actually discovered. The real findings had been shared through carefully managed channels with select government agencies, military research divisions, and international scientific organizations prepared to handle sensitive information responsibly. The entity's instructions had been clear. Share carefully. We will be watching. Sarah had spent months working with security experts and scientific advisors to develop a disclosure strategy that would gradually introduce humanity to the reality of their situation. The initial revelation of exotic microorganisms was just the first step in a process designed to expand over decades, slowly preparing civilization for eventual contact with their ancient planetary neighbors. Following her presentation, Sarah returned to her hotel room in Geneva, exhausted but satisfied with the day's progress. The international response had been exactly what they'd hoped: intense scientific interest, balanced with appropriate caution about the implications of their discovery. She was reviewing her notes when she noticed condensation forming on the room's window despite the controlled interior climate. The moisture collected into familiar patterns, geometric designs that matched the alien architecture she remembered from beneath the ice. A gentle knock at her door interrupted her observation. Sarah opened it to find a woman in her 50s wearing the standard uniform of hotel housekeeping staff. But the woman's eyes held an intelligence that seemed far too ancient for her apparent age. Dr. Chen. The woman spoke in perfect English, though Sarah detected undertones that suggested the words were being translated from thoughts rather than language. We need to discuss your progress. Sarah's heart hammered as she recognized the presence behind the human facade. You're one of them. The woman smiled, and for a moment Sarah glimpsed something vast and alien looking out through borrowed human features. We have maintained observers among your kind for longer than your civilization has existed. Recent events required more direct oversight of the disclosure process. How many of you are up here? Sarah asked, stepping aside to allow her visitor to enter. Sufficient to ensure the transition proceeds smoothly. The entity replied, settling into the room's chair with movements that seemed just slightly wrong for human anatomy. Your species is approaching several technological thresholds that will require guidance. Climate engineering, genetic modification, space exploration. These developments could be beneficial or catastrophic. The implications struck Sarah like a physical blow. You're already among us. You've always been among us. In small numbers carefully placed, the entity confirmed. We have influenced your development subtly, a suggestion to a researcher here, an inspiration to an inventor there. Your myths of angels and demons often described encounters with our kind, though your ancestors lacked the context to understand what they were experiencing. Sarah sank into the room's other chair, struggling to process this revelation. What happens now? Now you and your colleagues continue serving as bridges between our civilizations, the entity explained. Over the next several decades, we will gradually reveal more advanced technologies through your research programs. Your species will slowly become accustomed to concepts that would cause panic if introduced too quickly. And if humans react badly, if there's resistance or attempts to use the technology for warfare. The entity's expression remained unchanged, but Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Your species' reaction to our presence will determine whether this partnership continues, or whether we withdraw permanently back to our deep sanctuaries and leave you to face your planetary challenges alone. The woman stood to leave, but paused at the door. The other members of your Antarctic team are receiving similar visits tonight. You are no longer observers of our civilization, Dr. Chen. You are now participants in determining whether your species is worthy of joining the larger galactic community. After the entity departed, Sarah sat in her hotel room, staring out at the lights of Geneva, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what she'd learned. The discovery in Antarctica hadn't been an accidental encounter with alien life. It had been a carefully orchestrated first contact scenario designed to identify humans capable of handling the reality of their situation. She and her colleagues weren't just scientists who had stumbled across evidence of advanced life. They were now intermediaries in a process that would determine humanity's future relationship with intelligences that had been guiding their development from the shadows for millennia. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Webb. Did you get a visitor tonight too? Similar messages appeared from Liu, Petrov, Rodriguez, and Larson. They were all experiencing the same revelation simultaneously. Their underground encounter had been just the beginning of a much larger and more complex relationship between humanity and the beings who had been quietly shaping their world from beneath the ice. As Sarah prepared for bed, she caught her reflection in the hotel room mirror. For just a moment, she could have sworn she saw something else. Looking back, eyes that held knowledge spanning geological ages, intelligence that had watched civilizations rise and fall like seasons of a year too long for human comprehension. The face in the mirror was still her own, but Sarah now understood that she was no longer entirely human. The exposure to alien consciousness beneath Antarctica had changed her at a fundamental level, creating a hybrid awareness that bridged two different forms of intelligence. She was becoming something new, part human, part ambassador, part guardian of secrets that could reshape the world. And somewhere beneath the ice caps of both polar regions, ancient intelligences watched and waited to see whether humanity would prove worthy of the cosmic citizenship that awaited species mature enough to handle the responsibilities of advanced civilization. The coldest place on Earth had revealed the warmest welcome humanity had ever received. Whether they deserved it remained to be seen.